The phone rang during dessert, shattering the warmth of my son's dining room like glass against concrete. Maria's voice trembled on the other end, high-pitched and breathless in a way I had never heard before. "Mrs. Patterson, you need to come home right now. There is a truck outside and people are moving your furniture out of the house." My fork clattered against the fine china, and I felt my heart slam against my ribcage. Across the table, my son Marcus locked eyes with me, his attorney instincts already sensing catastrophe before I spoke a single word. His wife Jennifer reached for my hand, but I was already standing, already moving, already knowing with absolute certainty who had dared to violate my home. Rebecca. My own daughter. My own flesh and blood. 7 months had passed since I discovered her plan to have me declared mentally unfit. 7 months since Marcus helped me file restraining orders against her fraudulent attempts to steal my estate through falsified medical reports. 7 months since I believed the legal barriers would be enough to stop her. I was wrong. "Maria, get out of there immediately," I commanded into the phone, my voice cutting through the panic with authority that surprised even me. "Do not confront anyone. Leave through the back door and wait at the neighbor's house." Marcus was already grabbing his jacket and keys, his jaw set in that determined way that reminded me so much of his father. "Mom, what is happening right now?" His voice carried barely controlled fury. "Your sister is robbing me blind," I said flatly, and the words tasted like poison on my tongue. The drive across town felt both endless and instantaneous. Marcus drove with white-knuckled precision while I called the police, my voice steady as I reported a burglary in progress at my address. The dispatcher asked if I knew the suspects, and I paused for only a moment before answering no. It was not technically a lie. The woman breaking into my home was not the daughter I raised. That girl disappeared years ago. Rebecca had been distant for months before the guardianship scheme came to light. Ever since she married Greg, that smooth-talking financial advisor who lost his securities license after some shady dealings with elderly clients. Ever since their expenses started exceeding their income and desperation crept into every phone call, every visit, every interaction. But I never imagined this level of brazen criminality. The moving truck sat in my circular driveway like a monument to betrayal. Its rear doors gaped open, revealing the contents of my life stacked carelessly inside. My mother's antique dresser. The grandfather clock that survived 3 generations. The mahogany dining table where I fed my children thousands of meals. All of it stolen, boxed up, ready to disappear. 2 police officers stood on my porch speaking with a blonde woman whose posture radiated false confidence. Even from 50 yards away, I recognized Rebecca's gestures, the way she tilted her head when spinning lies, the practiced smile she used when manipulating strangers. She saw me approaching and her smile faltered for exactly 2 seconds before reconstructing itself. "Mom," she called out brightly, waving as though I had simply returned from the grocery store. "Perfect timing. I was just about to call you. We are getting everything organized for the move." Officer Ramirez, a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, turned to me with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, this woman claims to be your daughter and says she has your permission to relocate your belongings while you transition to assisted living." The audacity stole my breath. Transition to assisted living. She had crafted an entire narrative, complete with fictional medical concerns and fabricated living arrangements. "I am 72 years old," I said clearly, pulling my driver's license and house deed from my purse. "I am in perfect health. I have no plans to move anywhere. And I certainly did not give anyone permission to enter my home or touch my belongings." Greg appeared in my doorway carrying a box labeled kitchen items. Behind him, I glimpsed my granddaughter Sophie hovering in the hallway, her 11-year-old face confused and frightened. My grandson Caleb, only 7, clutched a stuffed rabbit and stared at the police with wide eyes that would haunt my dreams for months. Those children. God help me, those innocent children caught in their mother's web of greed. Officer Ramirez examined my documents with careful attention while her partner, Officer Kim, began photographing the scene. Rebecca's composure started cracking at the edges. She whispered urgently to Greg, who looked like a man desperately wishing he could vanish into thin air. "Mrs. Patterson," Officer Kim asked, "how do you believe these individuals gained access to your home?" "Greg did some handyman work for me over the summer," I replied, watching Greg's face drain of color. Rebecca suggested it would help them financially while assisting me with home maintenance. "He must have duplicated my keys during that time." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush bones. Greg would not meet anyone's eyes. Rebecca threw him a look of pure hatred before turning back to the officers with renewed desperation. "Look," Rebecca said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I had grown to despise. "This is clearly a family misunderstanding. My mother is getting older and sometimes she forgets conversations we have had. We discussed this move weeks ago when she was having those memory issues." Memory issues. The calculated cruelty of it made my blood run cold. She was building a case in real time, laying groundwork for future incompetency claims even as the police arrested her. "Officer Ramirez," I said calmly, 7 months ago my daughter attempted to have me declared incompetent through fraudulent medical evaluations. My son Marcus, who is an attorney, helped me obtain protective orders blocking all such attempts. This home invasion is a continuation of that criminal pattern." Marcus stepped forward with his briefcase, spreading legal documents across the hood of his car. Court orders. Denied petitions. Evidence of Rebecca's previous schemes. The officers studied them with growing interest, while Rebecca's story collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. "Those are misunderstandings," Rebecca protested weakly. "I was only trying to help Mom manage her affairs during a difficult time. By stealing her house," Officer Kim asked dryly, and I saw Rebecca flinch. Backup units arrived as Rebecca's fabrications completely disintegrated. The moving company employees confirmed they had been hired by Rebecca Morrison to transport items from her mother's residence to a storage facility across town. They had been told it was an authorized move, a family helping an elderly woman downsize. Based on the evidence, Officer Ramirez addressed me directly. "We have probable cause for multiple felony charges including burglary, theft, conspiracy, and attempted exploitation of an elderly person. However, given that minor children are present, we need to handle this carefully." Through my living room window, Sophie and Caleb pressed their faces against the glass, watching their world implode. My heart shattered for them. Whatever Rebecca and Greg had done, these babies were innocent casualties of their parents' greed. "I want to press full charges," I said firmly. "And I want emergency custody of my grandchildren. They should not suffer because their parents chose to become criminals." Rebecca's mask finally shattered completely. "You cannot take my children. This is a family matter. You are supposed to help family, not destroy them. Breaking into someone's home is not a family matter." Officer Kim replied matter-of-factly as he retrieved his handcuffs. "It is called burglary." The arrest took nearly an hour. Rebecca screamed about betrayal and family loyalty while Greg submitted silently. His shoulders slumped in defeat. As the patrol cars pulled away with my daughter and son-in-law in custody, I felt vindication rather than grief. Sometimes the universe demands accountability. Marcus approached gently. "Mom, are you certain about taking the kids? This could be years, not months." I looked at Sophie and Caleb, now clinging to each other in my doorway, and knew there was no other choice. These children needed stability, safety, and unconditional love. I could provide all three. The emergency custody hearing happened at 8 o'clock the next morning in a courthouse that smelled of floor wax and desperation. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s who had seen every family crisis imaginable, reviewed the evidence with grim efficiency. "Mrs. Patterson," she addressed me directly, "are you prepared to assume full temporary custody of 2 minor children while their parents face serious criminal charges?" "Yes, Your Honor. They are my grandchildren and they deserve stability during this crisis." A social worker named Patricia Chan had conducted a rapid home evaluation at 6 that morning, measuring bedrooms and asking pointed questions about my health, finances, and ability to care for children. She pronounced my home suitable for emergency placement. The alternative, foster care with strangers, was unthinkable. Sophie and Caleb sat in the gallery with Jennifer, drinking juice boxes and looking shell-shocked. They had spent the night at Marcus's house while I prepared bedrooms and tried to process the magnitude of what I was undertaking. Rebecca's public defender, a young man who looked fresh out of law school, argued half-heartedly for bail and immediate return of the children. Your Honor, my client was facing homelessness with 2 young children. Her actions, while misguided, stemmed from desperation rather than malice. Greg's attorney took a different approach, throwing Rebecca completely under the bus. Your Honor, my client was coerced by his wife into participating in this scheme. He is willing to cooperate fully with prosecutors in exchange for consideration. Judge Morrison listened with visible skepticism before delivering her ruling. Temporary emergency custody granted to the grandmother. Both parents remanded to custody pending trial. No contact with minor children except supervised visitation after completion of court-mandated counseling. As we left the courthouse, Rebecca's cries echoed through the marble hallways. But for the first time in months, I felt peace instead of guilt about her anguish. Grandma, Sophie's quiet voice interrupted my thoughts as we walked to my car. Are we going to live with you now? For a while, sweetheart. Until everything gets figured out. Caleb, always more direct, asked the harder question. When are Mommy and Daddy coming home? I buckled them into car seats I had installed that morning, choosing my words with surgical care. Your parents made very serious mistakes and now they have to face consequences. But you are safe with me and that is what matters right now. What I did not say was that their parents were facing years in prison. These children might be with me permanently. Driving home to our home now, I realized Rebecca's desperate gamble had backfired in the most ironic way imaginable. Instead of gaining access to my money and property, she had given me something infinitely more precious. A second chance at motherhood, this time with wisdom and patience I never had at 30. 3 weeks into our new arrangement, I discovered something that shocked me to my core. I was actually good at being a full-time grandmother. Not the visiting kind who spoiled them with candy and sent them home overstimulated, but the real kind who packed lunches, enforced bedtimes, and knew exactly which voice to use when Caleb tried negotiating his way out of homework. Grandma, why did Mommy try to take your house? Sophie asked one morning over breakfast, her spoon creating tiny whirlpools in her oatmeal. The question I had been dreading had finally arrived. How do you explain to an 11-year-old that her mother is a calculating criminal without destroying her entire sense of security? Sometimes adults make terrible choices when they are scared, I said carefully. Your mommy was scared about money and housing, but instead of asking for help the right way, she took something that was not hers. Like when I took Sophie's headphones without asking. Caleb looked up from his toast. Similar but much more serious because adults know better and there are bigger consequences. The parallel seemed to satisfy Caleb, but Sophie's expression suggested she understood far more than she was letting on. 11-year-olds, I was learning, are remarkably perceptive about adult dysfunction. My phone buzzed with a call from Detective Wallace, who had been investigating the case. Mrs. Patterson, we have uncovered additional evidence that significantly expands the scope of this investigation. Can you come to the station this afternoon? The evidence turned out to be a digital paper trail showing Rebecca's scheme went far deeper than a simple home invasion. She had been systematically planning to seize control of my assets for over 2 years, researching incompetency laws, consulting with unethical attorneys who preyed on families, and even attempting to fraudulently access my medical records to fabricate evidence of dementia. She filed preliminary guardianship paperwork 3 weeks before the break-in, Detective Wallace explained, sliding documents across his desk. If you had not pressed charges immediately, she would have used the incident as proof you were no longer capable of independent living. The calculated cruelty of it left me breathless. This was not desperation or poor judgment. This was premeditated elder abuse with my own grandchildren as unwitting pawns. There is more, Detective Wallace continued grimly. We found evidence she has been monitoring your bank accounts through fraudulent means for at least 6 months. Your bank is conducting an internal investigation into how she gained access. I drove home in a fog, trying to process the magnitude of Rebecca's betrayal. When I pulled into my driveway, Sophie and Caleb were waiting at the window, faces pressed against the glass like eager puppies. "Grandma, we made you something," Caleb announced, running to meet me with a construction paper card decorated with glitter and marker drawings. "Welcome home, Grandma" was written in Sophie's careful cursive with Caleb's signature scrawled underneath in purple. Looking at their innocent faces, I understood the deepest truth. Rebecca's greatest crime was not trying to steal my money. It was nearly destroying these children's lives in the process. The trial began on a gray Monday in February, exactly 5 months after the invasion. The courtroom packed with reporters drawn by sensational headlines. "Daughter arrested for robbing elderly mother. Grandmother sends own child to prison." The media circus was exhausting, but Marcus had hired a publicist to protect the children's privacy and keep cameras away from their schools. Rebecca had fired her public defender and hired Amanda Torres, a criminal defense attorney known for brutal honesty rather than manipulation. It was the first smart decision Rebecca had made in years. "Your Honor," Attorney Torres addressed the court during opening statements, "my client accepts full responsibility for her actions. She made catastrophic choices driven by financial desperation and untreated mental health issues, but she is prepared to face consequences and make genuine amends." The prosecution painted a picture of calculated elder abuse that made me squirm in my seat. While factually accurate, hearing my family dysfunction dissected for public consumption felt like being stripped naked in front of strangers. When they called me to testify, I took the stand with trembling hands and told the truth about years of manipulation, the incompetency threats, the invasion of my home, and the trauma inflicted on innocent grandchildren. But I also talked about the little girl who used to make me birthday cards, the teenager who believed in magic, and the young mother who once sang lullabies with such tenderness. "Mrs. Patterson," the prosecutor asked, "in your professional opinion as the victim, was your daughter's behavior calculated or impulsive?" I looked at Rebecca, sitting at the defendant's table with tears streaming down her face, and realized I knew the answer with absolute certainty. "Both," I said quietly. She calculated how to exploit me, but she impulsively destroyed everything that actually mattered in the process. Greg had already accepted a plea deal, receiving 3 years probation in exchange for testifying against Rebecca. His testimony seemed to break something fundamental in her. She stared at him with the hollow expression of someone who finally realized she had married a coward. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges: burglary, grand theft, conspiracy, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and identity fraud. Judge Morrison sentenced Rebecca to 5 years in prison with possibility of parole after 3. She also ordered full restitution for stolen property and mandated intensive counseling for both parents. As the bailiff led Rebecca away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one final time. "Take care of my babies," she whispered, and I saw genuine remorse in her eyes for the first time in years. "I will," I promised, meaning every syllable. But what I did not expect was how much caring for them would heal something broken inside me too. 20 months later, I stood in my kitchen watching Caleb methodically arrange his cereal by color while Sophie practiced piano in the living room. The music should have driven me crazy. It would have driven the old me crazy. But somehow it had become the soundtrack of our peaceful existence. "Grandma, do I still have to go to therapy?" Sophie asked during breakfast, closing her sheet music with dramatic flair. The court had mandated counseling for both children to help them process their parents' crimes and abandonment. A reasonable requirement that had actually been tremendously beneficial. "Do you think you still need it?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. "Maybe. Sometimes I still get really angry at Mom for being so stupid." The casual brutality of children's honesty never ceased to amaze me. Sophie had processed her mother's crimes with remarkable emotional intelligence, while Caleb, being younger, had adapted to our routine with typical 8-year-old resilience. My phone buzzed with a call I had been expecting but dreading. Rebecca had been granted early parole and wanted to see the children. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Rebecca's parole officer speaking. She has completed all required programs and has been approved for supervised visitation. Are you willing to facilitate contact?" My first instinct was to refuse. We had built a beautiful life together. Sophie was thriving in advanced placement classes. Caleb had joined soccer and discovered a talent for goaltending. I had discovered that raising children at 74 was actually easier than it had been at 35. I had patience now, perspective, and financial security to give them opportunities one could never provide my own children decades ago. But I also remembered the broken woman in that courtroom, finally accepting responsibility for catastrophic choices. What are the conditions? I asked carefully. The meeting took place at the Family Services building under strict supervision. Rebecca looked different, healthier somehow, despite years in prison. She had gained weight. Her hair was longer and neat. Her eyes held something I had not seen in years. Genuine humility and hard-won self-awareness. "Hi, babies," she said softly as Sophie and Caleb approached with visible caution. "Hi, Mom," Sophie whispered, but she stayed pressed close to my side. Caleb, now 9 and considerably taller, seemed to barely remember her. "Are you coming home now?" Rebecca's face crumpled with genuine emotion. "No, sweetheart. Cannot come home. I did something very, very wrong and I am still paying for those choices." For 90 minutes we sat in that sterile room while Rebecca apologized to her children, explained her actions in age-appropriate terms, and promised to work every day to become someone worthy of their respect. The kids were polite but emotionally distant, treating her like a friendly acquaintance rather than their mother. "They do not really know me anymore," Rebecca said quietly as we walked to the parking lot afterward, her voice thick with suppressed grief. "That is what happens when you abandon children," I replied, not unkindly but with absolute honesty. "No. I deserve this." She paused, struggling with words that seemed to physically hurt. "Mom, I spent 20 months in intensive therapy learning to take real responsibility. I was addicted to prescription painkillers after my back surgery 4 years ago. Instead of getting help, I got desperate and paranoid. Everything I did to you, to my children, came from that desperation and addiction." This was the first I had heard about opioid addiction, but it explained so much about her increasingly erratic behavior over recent years. The mood swings, paranoia, the escalating financial desperation despite decent income. "I am not using that as an excuse," Rebecca continued quickly. "I am explaining the path that led me to hurt everyone I loved. The choices were still mine. The responsibility is completely mine." 6 months after that first supervised visit, Rebecca had earned weekly meetings at a family center downtown. She had completed addiction treatment, found work at a non-profit helping formerly incarcerated women reintegrate into society, and was living in a modest apartment with a roommate who kept her accountable. The transformation was remarkable but fragile, like new skin over deep wounds. Sophie, now 13 and fiercely protective of Caleb, still watched her mother with wariness born of betrayal. Trust once shattered so completely might never fully return, but respect was growing slowly and carefully. "Mom saved our family," Caleb announced one Saturday as Rebecca helped him with a science project about bridges. "She could have let us go to foster care but she did not." I looked at Rebecca, who was patiently helping him glue popsicle sticks into an arch design, and saw tears streaming down her face. "Your grandma did save you," Rebecca said quietly, her voice breaking. "And she saved me too, even though I absolutely did not deserve it." That evening after Rebecca returned to her apartment, Caleb asked the question I had been anticipating. "Is Mom ever going to live with us again?" "No, sweetheart. This is your home now. But Mom can visit regularly. And maybe someday when you are older you can visit her apartment too if you want." Sophie, wise far beyond her years, nodded solemnly. "I think that is better anyway. Mom needs to learn how to take care of herself before she can take care of anyone else." The insight was heartbreaking and absolutely accurate. Rebecca was making genuine progress, but she had permanently lost the right to primary custody through her own criminal choices. The children understood this instinctively, even if they could not fully articulate it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom, Jennifer and I have news. We are expecting twins. Think you can handle being a grandmother to 4 kids?" I laughed out loud at the beautiful absurdity. 5 years ago, I had been a lonely widow whose daughter was plotting to steal her independence and assets. Now I was raising 2 teenagers, rebuilding a relationship with their reformed mother, and about to welcome twin grandbabies into our chaotic family. Life, I had learned, had a twisted sense of humor about second chances. "What is funny, Grandma?" Caleb asked, looking up from his homework. "Just thinking about how much our family has grown," I said, ruffling his hair affectionately. And it was profoundly true. We had lost the toxic version of Rebecca but gained these amazing children and a chance for all of us to heal properly. Some families have to completely break apart before they can rebuild into something stronger and healthier. The day Rebecca earned unsupervised visitation rights, exactly 3 years after her arrest, she sat in my living room, the same room where I once found her directing movers to steal my furniture, and told me the complete story of her transformation. "There was this woman in prison named Sandra," Rebecca began, her voice steady but quiet with emotion. "She was serving time for embezzling from her elderly mother. One day she received a letter saying her mother had died, and she was not allowed to attend the funeral because she was still incarcerated for stealing from her. Sophie and Caleb were at school so we could speak freely about harsh adult realities. She completely broke down," Rebecca continued, her hands trembling slightly. "Started screaming about how she had destroyed everything that mattered for money she had already wasted. And I realized I was looking at myself 5 years in the future if I did not fundamentally change. It was the catalyst I had been waiting to hear about. The moment that transformed my manipulative daughter into someone capable of genuine accountability and growth. I tried calling you that night, but you had changed your number for obvious reasons. So I wrote you a letter instead. 32 pages of apology and explanation that I never sent because I realized words were completely inadequate. I had to prove I changed through consistent actions over time. I remembered receiving several letters forwarded through Marcus's law office, all of which I had thrown away unopened. Perhaps I should have read at least one. "The thing is, Mom, I spent so many years being jealous of your independence and strength that I tried to destroy you instead of learning from you. Even after Dad died, you had this grace, this ability to rebuild your entire life with dignity. I felt like a complete failure next to you. So I decided to tear you down instead of building myself up. So you decided destruction was easier than growth." "Exactly. And the pills made everything exponentially worse. They made me paranoid, desperate, willing to hurt people I genuinely loved. I convinced myself you owed me something just because I was your daughter, like being related created some kind of debt you had to pay." We sat in comfortable silence for a long moment. 2 women who had survived a war that nearly destroyed our entire family. "What do you want now?" asked finally. "I want to earn the right to be in my children's lives. Not as their primary parent. I permanently lost that through my own choices. But as someone they can respect and maybe eventually trust on some level. And I want to make real amends to you if you will allow me." Looking at this humbled, sober, genuinely remorseful version of my daughter, I realized something profound. I did not need Rebecca's amends for my own healing anymore. But maybe she needed to offer them to complete hers. "You cannot undo what you did," I said gently but firmly. "But you can prove through time and consistent behavior that you have learned from it." She nodded, accepting the boundary without argument or manipulation. Real progress. 3 years after that conversation, I stood in my kitchen watching Rebecca help 15-year-old Sophie with calculus while 13-year-old Caleb played with his baby twin cousins in the living room. Marcus and Jennifer's daughters had been born 8 months ago, and our Sunday family dinners had evolved into beautifully chaotic celebrations. "I still do not understand why x equals -4, Sophie complained, erasing her work for the 5th time with visible frustration. "Think of it like a balance scale," Rebecca explained with impressive patience. "Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other side to keep it balanced." Watching them work together with genuine warmth, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in Sophie's academic excellence and determination. Satisfaction in Rebecca's genuine effort to be helpful rather than intrusive or controlling. Deep contentment in the stable life we had all painstakingly built from the ashes of betrayal and broken trust. The media attention had been intense for about 8 months after the trial. Wealthy grandmother Jael's own daughter had been tabloid gold, but Marcus had hired an excellent publicist to protect the children's privacy and keep aggressive reporters away from their schools and activities. Eventually, newer scandals captured public attention, and we faded back into blessed anonymity. Rebecca would never live in my house again. That boundary was permanent and absolutely non-negotiable. But she had earned the right to be meaningfully involved in her children's lives, and more importantly, she had become someone genuinely worthy of that privilege through years of consistent effort. "Grandma," Caleb called from the living room where he was gently rocking one sleeping baby. "Can Rebecca come to my soccer championship game next Saturday?" I looked at Rebecca, who was trying desperately not to appear too hopeful and failing completely. "If she wants to," I said simply, and the smile that spread across Rebecca's face was radiant and completely genuine. 3 years of intensive therapy, consistent accountability, and genuine behavioral change had earned her this simple privilege. Watching her son play competitive soccer with his family cheering from the stands. My phone buzzed with an email from Sophie's academic advisor. Sophie has been selected for the State Science Olympiad team. Congratulations on her exceptional achievement. I showed the message to Sophie, who squealed with pure joy before immediately asking, "Can Mom come to the competition?" "If she can get time off work," I replied carefully, watching Rebecca's eyes fill with grateful tears she did not try to hide. These children were thriving in ways I never imagined possible when I first took custody. Stability, consistent boundaries, unconditional love, and proper therapy had transformed them from traumatized victims into confident, secure, emotionally healthy young people. "Thank you," Rebecca said quietly as she gathered her things to leave. She never overstayed her welcome, never pushed boundaries, always respected the careful structure we had established through years of effort. For what specifically? For saving my children when I could not. For giving me the chance to earn my way back into their lives. For showing me what real strength and grace actually look like in practice. As I watched her drive away to her modest apartment, I reflected on the strange and winding journey that brought us all to this unexpected place. 5 years ago I had been a vulnerable widow whose daughter was plotting to steal her home, independence, and life savings. Now I was the fierce matriarch of a healing and growing family, confident in my worth and secure in my choices. This morning, as I write this final reflection, I am sitting on my back porch watching Sophie teach her baby cousins to clap their hands while Caleb practices penalty kicks in the yard. Rebecca is inside making sandwiches for our picnic lunch, and Marcus is setting up outdoor games Jennifer requested for the twins' first birthday celebration. At 77, I am busier than I have been in decades, but also more genuinely fulfilled. These children, all 3 generations of them, have given me purpose and joy I never expected to find at this stage of life. My phone buzzes with a video call from Daniel, Marcus's law partner, who married Rebecca's former roommate from the transitional housing program 9 months ago. Our family tree has become wonderfully complicated as we have all learned to heal and grow together. "Eleanor," he calls from the screen with his characteristic warmth. "Are you ready for birthday party chaos?" I laugh, looking around at the beautiful chaos that has become my completely normal life. "Bring it on." Rebecca appears at my elbow carrying a platter of sandwiches cut into neat triangles. "Mom, thank you for letting me be part of this. For not giving up on me even when I deserved nothing. 5 years ago those words would have been manipulation designed to extract something from me. Today there is simple gratitude from a woman who has learned through painful experience the difference between earning love and demanding it as some kind of birthright. "You earned it through years of consistent effort," I reply honestly, and she nods with quiet satisfaction. As the family gathers for our celebration, I think about the letter I will write to other grandmothers facing similar situations. The letter that will tell them it is absolutely possible to love someone without enabling their destructive behavior. To set firm boundaries without abandoning family completely. To find strength in saying no to actions that hurt everyone involved. Rebecca's greatest crime was not trying to steal my money or my home. It was almost preventing me from discovering who I was truly meant to be at this stage of my life. The woman who chose love over resentment. Boundaries over revenge. Healing over perpetual victimhood. The woman who learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in someone else's self-destruction. The woman who finally understood that her worth was not measured by her usefulness to others, but by her willingness to protect what mattered most: her own well-being, her grandchildren's safety, her family's potential for genuine healing. Today, watching my family laugh and play in the yard of the house Rebecca once tried to steal, I know exactly who that woman is. She is me. Stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who respect her because she first learned to respect herself. And that, my friends, is the most valuable inheritance I could ever leave behind. Not money or property, but the living example of how to survive betrayal, enforce boundaries, and build something beautiful from the ruins of what was broken.